So, welcome everyone again to addressing microaggressions in toward the Black perinatal population in healthcare settings. Today's objectives, we're going to cover increasing awareness of socio-historical connections of care for Black women. We're going to deconstruct the stereotypes associated with Black women in healthcare settings. We're going to explore the role of race-based microaggressions and their effects on patient outcomes in healthcare settings. And we're going to apply the critical race theory to day-to-day interactions in the healthcare settings. So before we get started, this is a very heavy topic. Sometimes it can trigger emotions or memories of an instance where you may have experienced a microaggression. So I would love for you all to just first close your eyes if you're able to, and take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And we're just going to ground ourselves in this moment, in this time, in this space. All of you have done tremendous work to get to this point in your lives. You've overcome certain oppressive or difficult challenges. And so I want to just take a moment to honor the space that we're currently in right now. I want you to visualize a lemon. It can have any characteristics that you would like for it to have, but think of a lemon. And I want you to take your proverbial knife, your knife that's located on your counter, and I want you to take that lemon. I want you to cut it in half. And once you cut that lemon in half, you'll see two sides. And then I want you to take the knife and I want you to cut that lemon in quarters. And then safely put down your knife. I want you to pick up a piece of the lemon, one of the quarters, and I want you to take the lemon and I want you to smell it. Think about the smell of a lemon, okay? Then I want you to take your tongue and I want you to rub your tongue against the lemon. Think about how it tastes. Do you taste the seeds? Do you taste the texture? Do you taste the sourness? And then I want you to also take that lemon and I want you to squeeze it. Squeeze the juice out of it like you're putting it on a salad or putting it in tea. Okay? I want you to take another deep breath. And I want you to open your eyes. Do you all see a lemon in front of you? Do you have a lemon in your hand? Do you taste the lemon still in your mouth? I want you to think about this exercise as we're going through this presentation. This is not something that you have tangible in your possession, but with our minds and with our experiences and our memories, we can recall all of the things that a lemon can remind us of, the way it tastes, the way it smells, the way it feels. So as we progress through and we're talking about microaggressions, it may trigger some visceral experience, some visceral memory. But I want you to keep that in mind, that even though you don't see this in front of you, doesn't mean that it didn't happen, okay? So you're your presenter. I'm your presenter. What do you see when you look at this picture, okay? If you're able to write in the chat, write what you see. You may see my hair, you may see my hat, you may see my beautiful baby, you may see us rocking our tan that we got on. You may see my facial features, my jewelry, but what you don't see is my trauma. You don't see what I'm struggling with in my new motherhood journey. You don't see my zip code. You don't see how I'm feeling right now, which is somewhat nervous, but I'm gonna get into it as we progress through. I'll loosen up a little bit, but you don't see the things that I struggle with as a Black woman and as a new mom. And so when we're thinking about our clients and we're thinking about our space, I represent the demographic that we're talking about, Black perinatal population. And you may be asking yourself, like, what's the point of that? The point of it is my personal and my lived experience and my professional experience informs why we need to talk about microaggressions and ultimately how people use microaggressions to make people feel inferior, whether that's subconsciously or consciously. So I want to hear about your experience. Have you ever experienced a microaggression, specifically in a healthcare setting? Now, you may experience microaggressions as it relates to work. You may have had a stranger come up to you and say something that was out of line. But think about this in a healthcare setting. Have you had a doctor, a nurse, someone in registration make you feel that you didn't belong or that you were inferior? So some of the definitions that we're going to talk about, which we are going to give the definition of microaggressions, but you may be asking yourself, what do you mean by birthing population? So birthing population is a gender inclusive term that provides space for all who give birth. Our LGBTQIA plus members who don't identify as certain historical terms that we've used may can be included in this space of birthing people or birthing population. Maternal mortality. So this is the big thing as it relates to Black maternal health. Death of a woman while pregnant or within the first 42 days following termination, directly related to pregnancy and not by accident or incident. So a lot of the issues that we're facing now as it relates to maternal mortality and morbidity are because these things are preventable. And so perinatal, you may have heard this term. The language is constantly changing, but perinatal describes the time period from conception to 1 year postpartum. And while we are broadening this definition, is because we're seeing it's not just postpartum depression that's occurring. We're seeing antenatal depression. We're seeing comorbidities that are coming up during the pregnancy. And we need to expand it through 1 year, even though we know postpartum can be year plus at this point. But we're focusing really on this time period of conception to 1 year and all of the challenges that the family faces during that time. So the impetus of this presentation is based off of Dr. Dorothy E. Roberts' book, Killing the Black Body. And if you have not read Killing the Black Body, I highly suggest that you do, because it's so important as we talk about reproductive freedom and justice as it relates to Black women in this country, and why social institutions have assumed this purpose of implementing population control, setting future trajectories for children, and the governmental interference that has degraded and intruded upon Black women's reproductive choices. We're going to talk about, well, it also talks about the social institution of race and reproductive freedom are rooted in slavery. And we're going to talk about that today as well. Black women's status and their childbearing is in the foundation of this nation. You think about the foundation of a house, we're literally like the ground that the foundation sits on right now. So the Black female body, okay? And this is not to exclude any of our members of any of the birthing population, but for the folks of today's presentation, you may hear me reference women and female, and so forgive me for that. But today is the focus of the Black female body, okay? Interestingly enough, the Black female body served as a dual role as a producer and a reproducer. One of the first like maternal fetal dilemmas that existed with Black women was that when a enslaved woman was pregnant and maybe she had to be disciplined, they would build a hole in the ground place the woman face down, and begin to proceed to whip the rest of her body to separate basically her from her fetus. So her role as being subjected to violence and degradation was to perpetuate the institution of slavery. Once slavery was outlawed in the early 1800s, they had to, the settlers, the colonists, the colonizers had to come up with a way to continue to reproduce slaves. So we went from what was historically a patriarchal society where the children would assume the lineage and the heirs of the father to a matriarchal society, and the whatever the status of the pregnant woman was at the time, the child also held that same status, even if the father was a free man. The Black female body had no rights to her body, her agency. Children were considered property under the law, considered naturally lascivious, and excluded from right to prosecute for acts of sexual violence. Historically high maternal and infant mortality rates, centered around coercive and reproductive policies used to control women's liberation, and considered to be inferior by society and the law, and subjected to harmful medical practices, which we will discuss today as well. So the Black female body has been through a lot, and we have not been able to hold the autonomy of our own bodies as it relates to society, the law, politics. And we have to ask ourselves why. Why are Black women dying at 3 to 4 times more than our white counterparts? Now, we know that the research has shown that it's due to perceived and structural racism. And the purpose of this presentation is to try to address that. But why are we dying? Why are people not recognizing that how they interact with us is the cause of that? When you think about the statistics, only about 5% of OB-GYNs in America are Black. So that means you have 90 to 95% of obstetricians, of providers treating Black women who do not culturally identify with that population. So as a result, we know that the statistics are disparaging. We know that we have experiencing weathering to our bodies due to stress and discrimination over the life course. 75% of Black women give birth at hospitals that serve predominantly Black populations. Black women lack access to quality contraceptive care, and only 87% of Black women of reproductive age have health insurance, and we have one of the highest infant mortality rates in the United States. So let's talk about stereotypes associated with Black women specifically. Now, the people treating us come to the understanding, or they may hear at some point along the way or identify with or have said some of these stereotypes. Welfare queen, the angry Black woman, the difficult Black woman, the crack mother, crack baby, the strong Black woman, Mammy, Jezebel, Sapphire, which alludes to this naturally lascivious role, ratchet, loud, ghetto, hoochie, baby mama. So we weren't seen as people in the beginning. Now we've been categorized with these negative tropes and stereotypes that automatically say we're difficult, we have issues, we have our fathers are not in the home, we're loud, we're rambunctious, we're all of these things. And where is this propaganda coming from? You know, how do people who travel from different countries who come and they treat us, how do they adapt this mindset, or they hear about these things? Where does this come from? So a Black woman's reality a lot of time is that I'm afraid that I will walk into the hospital to have my baby and not be able to walk out. When you think about Kira Johnson, you think about Shalon Irving, um, when you think about these women who dedicated their lives to their families, to the mission, it's almost unfair and unjust to not be able to go into a space that's supposed to be there to help and to heal and not come out because of something that was preventative. So I want to share a little bit of a brief clip from Jane Elliott and Angela Davis on the conversations of race and privilege, actually from my alma mater, the University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work. And we're going to check this out.
We live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. 3 months ago, I was at the University of Indiana, and they said, we think we should forget about differences and talk about similarities. So I had a tall white male stand on my left and a tall black female stand on my right on the stage. And I said, now, do you folks see any differences here? And of course, the first thing they said was height. And I thought, you fools, you just failed the test. I knew what they would say because I've done it so often. So I said to this tall white male, is your height important to you? He said, well, I said, did you earn it? No. Is it a physical characteristic over which you have no control? Yes. Does it give you power? Yes. Asked the black female the same thing. She said, well, but there are other issues to deal with. I said, we're going to deal with them. So then we dealt with sex. They said sex. I asked this white man if sex was important to him. I turned him into a man of color immediately. He turned brick red. And so then I had to stop and say, is the fact that you're male important to you? Yes. Does it give you power? Yes. So he has power as a white male. He has power, a tall male. So then they said age. And then finally somebody said color. And I said, thank you very much. In 50 years of asking these questions, you are the first group in which somebody has said color. Now, are you talking about skin color or hair color? This woman said skin color. So I said to this tall white male, is your skin color important to you? And this is an administrator in a college, in a university. He said, I never have to think about it. Think about that. I never have to think about it. I was just furious. And I said, did you earn it? No. Is it a physical characteristic over which you have no control? Yes. Does your skin color give you power? Yes. I said, are you pretty free to do and say and be and go wherever you choose as long as you stay within the confines of the law? He said, yes, I'm free and I'm not afraid of anything. I turned to this tall, black, beautiful woman and I said to her, he's a totally free man. Sometimes does it take courage for you to get out of bed in the morning? And she paused for a long moment, and then she said, I'm going to say something I've never said in public out loud before because I've been ashamed to. I said, and that is, she said, I have 2 children. They're both daughters. Both times when I was pregnant, I prayed that I wouldn't have a son because I didn't want to think of what he'd have to go through. And I didn't want to think about what I'd have to go through when I lost him. I looked up at that black woman and there was one tear slowly coursing its way down that left cheek of that beautiful black woman. This tall white man beside me was going, and I thought ugly things. I said to that group, what the hell have we done? How long will you continue to educate in ways that make this woman hope she doesn't have sons because of what this society might do to them? I'll never forget that moment. That was probably, if we had had a tape of that, we could change the world. White women, you don't want to be thought of the way we were thinking of you at that moment. White women want to have sons to carry on the family name. We live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. The white man on that stage was in the land of the free. That black woman was in the home of the brave. People, you need to realize that. I know there are some brave white men, but they choose to be or not to be brave. Black women have no choice. They have to be brave every day.
Five words.
Okay. Oh, wait. All right. Y'all know how technology goes. I was like, work with me. Okay. All right. So, and if you aren't aware of like contemporarily how this has been addressed, the documentary Aftershock came out in 2022. Um, and it's a very, very powerful documentary discussing black maternal mortality and its social determinants of health and how we can address when black women are dying, how this affects our society and our community. So we're going to really transition into explicit and explicit biases. Um, Let me just say this: everybody who is at watching this live and the ones that are watching this on replay, we all have bias. We we cannot help it. Our attitudes and things, our understanding shapes how we see the world and people. So explicit biases can be overt. They can be in your face. You're like, did you just say that to me? Implicit can be a lot more covert. And if you do not know the difference, or if you have implicit biases, I highly recommend you go to the Harvard Implicit Association test and take this exam. It is very powerful. It will let you know kind of where you stand and areas that you can work on. And one of the most important things that came out of 2020, and ACOG is the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, they recognize that there are racial and ethnic biases within the healthcare system. So they put out a statement saying, we understand that the socio-historical references in to why our profession is why these things are existing. And I felt like that was such a powerful thing to say, but what are we doing as far as next steps? Okay, impacts of implicit bias on the care of Black perinatal women. So we know about the maternal mortality rate, the quality of care received, by Black women for nearly every disease, including prenatal care, is less than our white counterparts. Income and upward socioeconomic mobility do not improve birth outcomes for Black women compared to white women. I think that statistic really shook me when I became aware of this problem and this issue. I mean, to this day, I think it's something that really triggers me, that no matter how well I do in life, it may not improve the birth outcomes for me, as it relates to my white counterparts who may be poor and uneducated. Um, Perceived racism contributes to and is largely responsible for increased morbidity and mortality among racial minority groups. And like I said, ACOG recognizes as something that is within the healthcare system. So the gold standard, and I'm using quotes on the gold standard, has been the able bodied heterosexual white male weighing 70 kilograms is the norm. They dominate the upper echelons of our society, imposing unconsciously or otherwise their values and preferences on the rest of the population. Deviations of this norm have been considered undesirable. So when you think about the eugenics movement, the birth control movement, A1 prom stop, it is to try to get people to do forced sterilization, so that we are not reproducing more of what we don't like. And gynecological discoveries have been made at the expense of Black female bodies. So we have to call a spade, y'all. We have to understand that microaggressions are not micro. They are statements, actions, or incidents regarding as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. Microaggressions are not always race based. They can be gender based. They can be sexuality based. They can be based on ability. And those who don't, who have different abilities, can be discriminated against using microaggression, as well as nationality. Like, you're not from here. Where are you from? You need to learn to speak this language. All of these things are considered microaggressions. So, what are the types of microaggressions? We have micro assaults, micro invalidations, and micro insults. And they basically are on this continuum of overt to covert. So, the assaults, like in your face, overt, blatant forms of discrimination. My Black patients are always angry. Why do I have to have so many Black patients? And most of these quotes that you will see, I would probably say 90% of them are things that I have actually heard working in hospitals as a social worker. Micro invalidations, insensitive or disparaging comments. Like, as a woman of color, I know exactly how you feel. How many of us have heard that statement? Or racism doesn't exist anymore. People should just stop complaining. Racism is embedded in the foundation of this country. Lastly, we have micro insults, dismissive and exclusion practices. I would like to give you Tylenol instead of hydrocodone, because maybe Tylenol 3, I don't want you to develop an opioid addiction. Or you're fine. I've seen this before. Don't worry about it. Really minimizing how we dismissing and minimizing someone's complaint about pain or about a grievance or something that they've had. So specifically, we have healthcare microaggressions, and because our healthcare system is very paternalistic, we tend to subserviently, whether knowingly or unknowingly, want to listen to our doctors, want to hear what they have to say, want to understand and feel like they have our best interests at heart. But sometimes providers in positions of authority can marginalize minority groups through culturally insensitive interactions. Microaggressions, healthcare microaggressions may also contribute to the delay of prenatal care. They represent an institutional betrayal and perpetuate systems that fail to respond to discrimination and racism appropriately. And even corporeal microaggressions, where their mainstream perceptions of moral superiority are expressed as bodily treatment, such as sterilization efforts that target single mothers. This actually was a study done in Puebla, Mexico, where forced sterilization was imposed upon single mothers. And as I stated, the birth control movement was very similar to that here. So these are actual quotes that I've heard from patients. I don't feel like my doctor likes me. Honestly, I don't like her either. I feel invisible. She rushes me. I don't like coming to my appointments. The doctor makes me feel like I'm not human. They don't listen. They don't look at me. And I never get the same doctor. If you know anything about being in a teaching hospital, you know sometimes you may not get the same physician. I feel like I'm being judged all the time. I'm doing the best that I can. My care here has not been good, but I do not know where to go. So many people go based off word of mouth or convenience, and those pose barriers too. I don't trust y'all social workers. Y'all like to take people kids and call CPS. And social work has a very, very influential role, especially in the maternal child health uh, field. I feel that we don't always um, have the best interest of the clients in mind, because we want to make sure that we're mandating reporting and we're following our ethics. But sometimes in CPS, Realized Child Protective Services, um, has almost a gatekeeping role as it relates to child welfare, the child welfare system. And I'm afraid of being here without my family. I don't trust the hospital. So this is This is the place where people go to get help, and this is how they're feeling, and what ultimately is affecting their mental health through their anxiety, depression, decrease to medical adherence, negative effect and apathy, even suicidal ideations, lack of behavioral control. And Black participants experience more inferiority related and criminality related microaggressions. So let's flip this. We're talking a lot about how these things affect Black people, but what if microaggressions happen to white people? Let's just take a look.
So you're not good at golf, but you're white.
People of color have to deal with racial microaggressions every single day. So microaggressions are those little unintentional insults that basically see people of color as stereotypes, which got me thinking, what if white people had to deal with racial microaggressions?
So, like, where are you from?
No, like, where are you really from?
Why do you have an accent? Like a Swedish accent.
You know, your English is really, really good. It's like I can't even tell you have an accent or anything.
I don't have an accent.
No, that's what I'm saying.
You don't speak Gaelic?
You don't speak German?
Can you say a curse word in European?
You know, like, what does that even mean?
Hey, Connor, you know about NASCAR stuff, right? Can you take a look at this?
Can you teach me how to line dance?
Play the banjo?
Act entitled in the supermarket.
I love white food. No real flavor to it. Never an upset tummy.
You're so exotic.
How do you get your hair like that? I love how it's so limp.
Ew, why does it feel like that? Oh my God, so it just does that?
No, you are really pretty for a white girl.
Your eyes are so round, like this.
You know who you look like? Kenny Chesney.
Zach Braff.
Emma Stone.
Rachel Maddow.
My friend Chad. Maybe you know him, because he's white too.
No, Emma Watson.
Not Macklemore. What's the other guy?
No, is it Emma Thompson?
It's CHAD, like Chad.
One of the Emmas. You look like an Emma.
You know who you look like? I bet you hear this all the time. Jeffrey Dahmer.
How does it feel to be the token white guy in the office?
Hey, Connor, can we get a white perspective on this?
I love everything about white culture. You guys are like so fun.
What do you mean you don't listen to Creed? You're white.
You've never tried meth. But you're white.
You don't act like a normal white person.
You're not really white though.
You're not really white.
I'm whiter than you are.
So, did all your ancestors own slaves?
No, but of course he wishes that he could still own slaves. That's a part of his culture.
Bryce, back me up on this one. The thing you have to understand about white culture
I
is
went
that
to
white
an
people are...
historically white college, so
Okay,
I know
but
about
I
white culture.
backpacked
Okay,
in
was that-
Europe.
So, can you see how ridiculous this was? I know. Story of my life. If you've ever experienced microaggressions because of your race, gender, sexuality, or body type, go ahead and vent about it in the comments.
Can you teach me how to, like, take a really popular...
Isn't that insane, y'all? I love that video, though. Okay. Let's keep going. We're powering on through. All right. Critical race theory, the infamous critical race theory, is an academic framework in the social sciences. It was developed in the legal field, but it uses philosophy that uses critical theory to examine society and culture as it relates to the categorizations of race, law, and power. It's this framework looks at race and racism and how these concepts and constructs interact and intersect with the laws and the social system. So the goal is to eradicate racist ideologies and structures. Social problems are created and influenced by social constructs such as classism and racism. And racism is embedded in the social welfare and public policy of our country. So the tenets of the CRT are centrality and intersectionality of race and racism, a challenge to dominant ideology, a commitment to social justice, importance of experiential knowledge, and the use of interdisciplinary perspective. So we may hear people talk about, I don't see color. Why is color blindness problematic? Well, as it relates to Black women, it minimizes the experience and feelings of Black women. Implicit biases are left unaddressed. It ignores the environmental factors that affect patient care, and it's associated with higher forms of prejudice. So how is power specifically used in healthcare settings? So you have these groups, the uninsured versus the insured, lower income versus upper middle class, us versus them, the haves and the have nots. You have positional hierarchies such as doctors and nurses versus social workers. You have the worthy versus the unworthy poor. So we talk often about patient-centered care and putting the patient first and allowing for self-determination. But power in healthcare settings can be inverted. Administration, the CEOs, the boards, the people who make the rules usually have a lot of, if not all of, the most power. And it trickles down to the doctors, the nurses, social workers, the reception staff. You see this hierarchy, and ultimately, the patient sometimes feels like they have the least power when they're the ones who there to get help. Social stratification, we think about upper class and class, upper class having the most power, lower class, which has the majority of everyone in it, has the least power. So, how do we address microaggressions? We have to discourage paternalistic and patient provider relationships. We have to let patients know what you feel is important. How can I serve you? How can I be of assistance to you? Establish and build rapport and mutual respect between providers and patients. The patient is the expert of their situation. We go to school, we attain all this knowledge and all this information to be able to best support. But how can we integrate that into the patient's lived experience, their, even from a systems approach? How can we look at it from the multi levels, the micro, the meso, the macro, exo, and even chronal systems? How can we integrate rapport and respect in um, in the conversation with our clients? Oh, excuse me. How can we integrate empathy and active listening um, to express understanding and comprehension? Empowering and advocating patients to voice their grievances if there's patient relations or contacting their insurance, letting them know like you have rights to be able to speak your mind, especially if you feel that you have been wronged in some way. Assess the barriers or determine the barriers or motivations to change. What is in the way? What's causing them to not be able to take their medication, or for them to feel? How can we level the playing field? Check our nonverbal cues and language when speaking to our patients. Sometimes we're annoyed, sometimes we're frustrated. Um, are we projecting those things onto our clients and our patients? And one of the most important kind of philosophies that I use is being curious and not critical. Sometimes we don't understand how people's lived experiences and where they come from, and we can operate in criticism of those things when we don't agree. So just be curious, ask questions. Tell me about a time when you, or tell me how that is going for you. Be curious. So, one thing that I want to leave you with as we think about how we can address microaggressions moving forward, as well as create a space to encourage our patients and our clients to address them, is to seek out their strengths and encourage them. Here at the School of Social Work and at Howard University, we talk about the Black perspective. We talk about strengths and how we can edify those strengths amongst our groups and our communities to improve the outcomes, to let them know that you're not coming in with this deficit and in this negative situation. We want to empower them to know that, oh, sorry, empower is later on. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but we want to encourage them to know that they have the right to advocate for themselves. We want to facilitate discussions and validate their feelings and their birth experiences. So when you're thinking of your sister from another mister, when you're thinking of that client or that patient who You're like, I just don't understand them. I don't get it. I don't know how to best serve them. Think about them as a person that that you love, that you enjoy, that think about that person in your life that means something to you, and how you would want them to experience their healthcare provider. And then emulate that, show that, express that empathy, advocate for them on behalf of their concerns. If you see a client who is struggling with a nurse or a social worker, encourage them and advocate for them to say, hey, speak up, say what you're feeling, send an email, let their manager know what your experience is. And then we're going to use empathy to connect with our patients on an emotional level and empower them to address microaggressions. The only way that we deal with this is that we call a spade, we admit to ourselves that we all operate within some level of bias, whether it's explicit or implicit. I mean, I'm sure some of you know what y'all say in the car when you get cut off. But we're thinking about how we try to uphold our professional values and ethics. And sometimes those things bleed over. We're human, we're people. And that does not excuse microaggressions being used to discriminate against others, but it does allow us to come up with empathetic ways to address something that we all deal with. All right, so we do have a survey here at the end. I'm open for questions if we have time and space for that in our chat. But I want to thank you all for being present with me during this presentation. I know this is a hard situation and a hard discussion to have, because this is something that we typically don't like to talk about, but it is it is embedded in our system, and we have to call a spade a spade. So I want to thank you all for your time. Black babies matter, Black mamas matter, Black families matter, Black communities matter, Black futures matter, Black life matters. And thank you again. All right, Asia.